watching the Ashland Cable Access Channel, seen throughout Jackson County on TCI Cablevision Channel 9. The Ashland Cable Access Channel is owned by the City of Ashland and operated by the Media Center at Southern Oregon State College. More than 500 Southern Oregon citizens representing a broad spectrum of interests gathered on September 21st at North Medford High School for a conversation with Oregon hosted by Governor Barbara Roberts. The purpose of this meeting was to enlist volunteers to assist in a series of statewide discussions that the governor hopes will lead to a comprehensive revision of Oregon's troubled tax laws, leading to a vote of the people sometime in 1992. The conversation with Oregon will determine the public's responses to what type of government services they want provided and how they want to pay for them. Here now is the Governor of Oregon, Barbara Roberts.
I'm just delighted about the size of this turnout. It's more than we'd expected, which is exactly what happened in Pendleton and Bandon, which I'm beginning to believe is going to happen every place in Oregon. It's a good sign that Oregonians are ready to talk about their future and participate in making it happen. So thank you very, very much for coming. Today marks the beginning of a very long journey, a journey home to the Oregon that we want for ourselves and for our grandchildren. And as we begin this conversation with the state about what our home would be like and will be like, it truly feels like a journey through some rather new territory and some uncharted areas. And I want you to know as we begin today how I feel as we start on this journey. I want you to know that I have a certain amount of anxiety. It's hard not to have anxiety when you start something this new and this big, and I feel that today as I have for the last couple of days. I also feel more strongly than ever before my kinship with Oregon and my obligation to make this state sound and healthy. And I feel good about the process we've chosen to build a strong future for Oregon because it's going to involve thousands and thousands of Oregonians, and I like that a lot. It's going to be a little like an old-fashioned barn raising, sort of pitching in and working together and getting something done that's valuable and necessary. But let me be clear about the barn raising. This conversation with Oregon does not pass the test for everyone who wants to make changes in Oregon. Since Ballot Measure 5 passed last November, the politicians and the public and the papers have expressed a variety of opinions and views about where we go from here. And when all of that discussion is boiled down, it seems to come down to two major choices. Those who support the quick fix and those who advocate the slow, painful breakdown of Oregon. Now, the quick fix solution would find a tax replacement to fill the holes that were created by Ballot Measure 5 and send that solution to the ballot. Well, those who called for the quick fix refused to face up to an inconvenient fact. For decades, Oregon politicians have sought tax reform, and for decades, they have failed. But the quick fixers treat leadership as if it were nothing more than a risk-free public relations campaign that all you have to do is find the right so-called spin and the right soundbite on TV. And this time, the people will buy your brand of soap. Had I chosen the quick fix method of getting this job done, I could have called my tax referral the Roberts Reform Package. It has kind of a nice ring to it, don't you think? Now, that would have looked like leadership if I'd have done that. And it would have sounded like leadership, and it would have probably smelled like leadership. And all those editorial writers all across the state would have heralded my action and talked about what a great leader I was. And then when the voters would have said no thanks, those same experts would have said, "Nice try, Governor." Well, there are no points for nice try. It's a game that nobody wins and Oregon loses. However, I could have joined a very exclusive club, governors whose tax reform plans have been blown out of the water by voters. I could have been part of that group. Now, I want to tell you, those governors all survived. But what about Oregon? What happened to Oregon in that process? We sit here with an outmoded, unfair, unstable tax system, and that is why I rejected the quick fix way of getting the job done, because I didn't believe it would get the job done. But I also reject the advice of those who counsel, wait for the pain to set in. Now, have you ever noticed that pain that they're so willing to wait for is always someone else's? Now, obviously, winning support for a tax change after the pain is a lot easier. I think we'd all agree that you're more likely to visit the dentist after you have a toothache than before. But waiting for the pain would be accepting a breakdown of Oregon that is so severe that I would be almost guilty of dereliction of duty. And it would mean correcting and repairing that damage to Oregon for years to come. And that's not going to happen on my watch. I did not run for governor to preside over the decline of the state of Oregon. Leadership is not about holding out some kind of false hopes and then watching them swept away. And it is not about fear and trembling in the face of some tough challenges. It's about bold reach, and it's about large design. It's about new approaches and about long-term creative solutions. I prefer to take my advice from Abraham Lincoln. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. And then Abraham Lincoln added, as our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. So let no one doubt my intentions. Even if ballot measure 5 had not passed, even if it had failed, I would have recommended a tax overhaul for Oregon. And I would have looked for a plan that forced all of us to think about and seriously think about attacking the problems that have piled up on Oregon's agenda. Think about those problems for a minute. Lack of availability to health care, housing shortages all over the state, crime, environmental problems, urban pressures. Plus, Oregon needs to get on with the job and the responsibility of educating our children and doing it well. We must be able to build roads in this state and sewers and housing for a growing population in Oregon. We need to be prepared to take advantage of new opportunities, economic opportunities in the Pacific Rim and Europe and other places. But a replacement tax measure would not have moved us one step closer to getting those challenges met and getting that job done. Why? Because ballot measure 5 is not really the problem. It's simply a warning sign. It's a shot fired across the bow of government by citizens who are fed up with an inequitable, ramshackle tax system that does not provide fairness in sacrifice nor fairness in reward. It is a system that is outmoded and outdated, and it cries not for just more of that reform talk, not for more Band-Aids, but for a real overhaul of the system. But again, tax overhaul alone will not move Oregon forward. That is not our only problem. We as Oregonians are by nature a pretty skeptical people, and we're skeptical of government solutions that come down from on high, and I don't have to tell you that, you know that. Our ability to handle our own affairs and our own communities has been one of Oregon's greatest strengths. Now, unlike many other states, in fact, most other states, Oregonians are not apathetic. They seriously care about the government process, about where their tax dollars are spent, about what programs and policies government institutes, about the effect of government on their lives. Watch. You speak out, you participate. I mean, look at how many people are here today, and that's been true in the last 2 days. Oregonians are not apathetic. You're willing to serve on committees and boards and commissions in your community at the statewide level. And I have the audacity to believe that Oregonians are willing to pay for services if they're convinced that the money is spent well and will not be wasted, and if the taxes are raised fairly. Plus, if the services that are paid for are meant to achieve common aims with some kind of a common agreement. But for way too long, our citizens have felt that their opinion doesn't matter anymore. Government has grown much more complex and much more technical. A diversity of citizens' opinions on almost any subject you want to name seems to create more losers than winners on almost any one of those issues. So nobody's quite happy with how things come out. Government faces conflicts now in Oregon between long-term Oregonians and newer arrivals who may see things very differently. Citizens feel like government is always talking to them, but it's seldom listening to them anymore. And we all have a desire for a little bit simpler times, to kind of go back to when things weren't so complex. And it's that desire for simpler times that makes the bureaucracy seem even more faceless and more removed from those of us in our day-to-day life. But here in Oregon, the home of the initiative and the referendum and the recall, the home of self-government, this is where it started in this country. Citizens fear that somehow we've lost our way. Here in Oregon, in the state that was once described as the most complete democracy in the world, we feel lost because government has lost its trust in the people, and Oregonians have lost their confidence in their government. Yet government, in a free and democratic society, is not the enemy of the people, and the people are not the enemy of the government. I believe this state is still a place where women and men can shape their own destiny and the future of their state. To those of you who may doubt the power for positive change that you can make, stop and think just a minute. It was the people's initiative process in this state that gave Oregon the 8-hour workday, the protection of our scenic rivers, and the right of Oregon women to cast their ballots in every election. And then Oregon voters also gave us the income tax, the open meetings law so your business could be done in public, and the Veterans Home Loan Program. Those are just a few of the things that you have done as voters. Those are common aims and common purpose, and that's how they got done. We have in this state literally everything we need for greatness. We have the natural resources, we have a high-quality workforce, we have the ports and the transportation network and the land, the schools, the energy, the livability, and the people. Most of all, we have the people, and I think we can see that today. My point is this: while change is inevitable, change for the worse is not inevitable. We can either make history or we can simply watch it. We must decide our future and not just accept it and let it happen to us. Because the decisions we make as a people and as a government in this state over the next year are going to affect the state for literally generations to come. So the stakes are very, very high, and the risks are high. But I believe that the reward is going to be great. It's going to be nothing less than the rebirth of citizenship. It means that the spirit of willing participation in a common effort that has shaped Oregon since pioneer days can literally come back to Oregon. It is a spirit that trusts to the wisdom and the effort of the people to build a better state and to help everyone do that. That's the kind of spirit that we need to have once again in Oregon if we're going to get this work done. And that's the kind of spirit that we need here today to move us forward, working together to get the job done. No people ever went backward to greatness. Oregon literally can remain the great state that we have been, but we have to act like one. Now, I want to be very clear with you. It's going to cost something. But the price of doing nothing, I think, would be far more costly. So I'm here today to ask for your help, to ask for your help for our state, to ask you to become a volunteer in the greatest Oregon experiment in democracy since statehood. Your job as a volunteer would be to help organize meetings, to interview other citizens, to lead workshops, all that are going to be part of this effort we're beginning. You could be one of the 1,500 volunteers who can help Oregonians design their future. You could give Oregonians the information they need to help them make informed choices. For instance, if you were designing Oregon today from scratch, what would it look like? Would it have any parks? Would it have good schools and colleges? Would it help drug-addicted babies? Would it help disabled people help themselves and their community, and senior citizens stay in their own homes? What kind of a place would Oregon be? And what level of public services would you want and would you need if we were doing that Oregon you thought was right? And finally, how would you pay for those services if you were designing that from scratch as well? What would a new Oregon tax design look like if you wanted the system to be fair and equitable and stable and to serve Oregonians for 3 or 4 or 5 decades into the future? Our purpose in this effort must be to find that commonality, to figure out what we have in common on those issues, and to reach a consensus about where we want to go, the level of services and taxation, and to set our priorities for Oregon so we can have some sense about what's most important to the people in the state, and then to get on with the business of our future. If this succeeds, it will be because thousands of people will have a sense of ownership in the final product. They will know that their voices were heard and that their views count in this state. Now, I want to tell you, there are those who believe and who say that this problem is too vast and too complicated for the people of Oregon to understand. They say we have no common goals anymore and that there is no basis for us finding agreement. As if the struggle to raise a family and to educate them and to find health care for them and to prepare and work together to make better communities and a better state are not goals worthy enough to bring us together in a common effort. I think the truth is that the skeptics have no faith in the future and they have no faith in the people. Well, quite frankly, I think we've had enough of the cynics and we've had enough of defeatism, and we can get beyond that in Oregon. Never let it be said that when this generation of Oregonians held the reins of power and choice, that we failed to live up to our responsibilities. This generation and the generations in this room could literally show itself. We could rise, as Lincoln said, with the occasion to get this job done. And that is why, as we begin this journey, I am asking for your help. I cannot do it alone. Few people are ever granted the opportunity to be the shapers of history and not just the bystanders. I can't promise you that what we are undertaking will be easy, and I cannot promise you certainly that everyone is going to join in the work. But I do promise you this: when we have successfully finished this journey, we will arrive home to a new Oregon, a home for which each one of us can truly say, "This is mine. I helped build it." And I ask you, could such a demonstration of democracy, of real citizen participation, happen anywhere else in this country except in the state of Oregon? So Oregon, I guess my message is to you, let's get started. Oregon's future is waiting. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. I think the goal, at least I hope after those remarks, is fairly clear. We're searching for our common aims and our common goals and some vision of what we want the state to be, and when we figure out what we want the state to be, how we want to pay for it. So our goal is to do that together. If you looked at the generalized vision for how this is going to happen, you would be looking at sort of in the fall, we'd be divining and working to get that vision and to reach the consensus about what we want Oregon to be, getting started on that process. As we moved into the winter, we'd get a report from the first 25,000 people who had been involved in this process, and then allow other people to respond to that report to say, is that my view of what it was, or are those 25,000 people off base? So we give you a chance to respond. And then we began, as we moved toward the spring, working toward looking at the tax overhaul part of this, is how do we build a tax structure that we think is fair and equitable and stable, and a tax structure that not only deals with state government, let me be clear about that, but recognizes that this tax structure all fits together and we all pay it, so we need to look at the schools and the cities and counties and other taxing jurisdictions. So when we look at this, it's a solution for all of those areas that we're concerned about. Now that's sort of the broad, quick overview of the time frame. Let me take just a couple of minutes to give you some specifics about October and November and December. In October, we're going to interview 2,500 or more what we call community leaders across the state. Now let me tell you first what those 2,500 community leaders, they're people that you don't always think of as community leaders. They could be a city council person or a county commission. They could be that kind of a leader. They could also be the minister of one of the largest churches in your area, the most active churches. They might be the librarian who talks to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people every month in the library, really knows people. They might be this person who heads a volunteer organization that knows the community really well and has a sense of feel about the needs of the community. They could be the head of the Grange or the head of some other organization in the community. They might be someone who's lived in the community for 50 years and knows it inside out. They might be somebody who doesn't like government, who does like government. The process is to try to find 2,500 people who really lead in the community in some way or another, and we can get a beginning there. Now think of this as being the meeting we started with today, right up here at the top. Then we expand to this 2,500 community leaders to get us started. And by the way, there will be volunteers doing those interviews, so they'll commit 10 hours to us to help go through and do those community leader interviews. And then we're going to move to the piece that's going to involve the next 20,000 people. Now this is an interesting and new process in Oregon that I think we're going to have a lot of excitement and fun, plus garnering a lot of information. We have a system in Oregon that some of you are familiar with. It's called the EdNet system. It is a communication system that works across the state that originally was intended to begin to help us do education from one place to another in the state. For instance, if you were in Eastern Oregon State College over in La Grande and you had a teaching class for nurses over there, they might be able to pick up on the EdNet system training information from Oregon Health Sciences in Portland to help them train those nurses without having to move all the way to another part of the state. So the system was set up to begin to do that information sharing and education across the state. We're going to use that EdNet system to do something it's never done before. There are about 60 locations where EdNet is located. And what we're going to do is broadcast from some of those into other areas. And the thing that's unique about the EdNet system, it not only broadcasts out, but it can bring information back. So you can talk to each other over it. So I could be in one location doing a broadcast and talking with Oregonians and listening back and forth at a number of other locations, 20 or so around the state. We are going to do that process by selecting 20,000 Oregonians at random across the state from the voter registration lists. They will come and participate in those EdNet systems and get it started so that we'll garner their ideas and their opinions from 20,000 Oregonians in that process. And then for those of you who don't get selected out of that first 20,000 random process, who've got something to say and want to say it, we will use the EdNet system for open meetings that occur in most of the major communities in the state. So if you didn't get selected, you can go into that open meeting on EdNet, again, so you could be communicated as well. And the one that's going to occur fairly close to this area is going to be at Road Community College on November the 16th, which is a Saturday. And you'll hear more about that, but it means that for those who didn't get selected, there'll be a place to get heard over the EdNet system. So we'll go through the November period of time. We will now have the 2,500 people and the 20,000 people, so we're approaching at least 22,500. And at that point in time, in December, we're going to stop and compile all the information we have and see what we've heard. Get a sense of what people are saying to us and what we believe their message is about taxation and services and where they want Oregon to go. We're going to do that so that we can report to you in January. And then at that point, we'll begin moving a larger group of people into the process. So it starts at the meetings like today, goes to the 2,500, goes to the 20,000, and then the response to that 20,000 will be reported to you so that we can get a then even broader response from the people of Oregon in general. So that is the way the process is going to work. And what we're doing here today is to ask you to help us make that process work. That you will do the interviews, you will be there working as workshop coordinators and facilitators and organizers as we do those locations all over the state and those meetings and the other parts that make this process work. So it's fairly complicated, and we can't do it without those 1,500 volunteers. So I'm asking you to be part of this process. I'm not preconceiving where you are and what your attitudes are and what your views are. We want you to volunteer to help get those views from Oregon all over the state. So if you are interested in doing that process, we will give you an opportunity today to listen to how it's going to work and what we would expect of the volunteers. We're asking 10 hours from you. We're not asking 100 hours. We're asking 10 hours from the volunteers who are part of this process, and we've gotten so many volunteers in Pendleton and Bend so far. If that's an indicator, we're going to be able to share this workload pretty well, and if we tell you 10 hours, it's not going to be 30. So we promise you that. We've got enough volunteers to make that happen. People to the first portion of it, the expansion to get the tax portion, the how do you pay for it portion done. Then if there is indeed a consensus in the state that we have something that we can take to the ballot and the people are ready to do that and think it needs done, we will go to the legislature and ask them to put the measure or measures that you have created on the ballot someplace between May of 1992 and September of 1992. We'd love to do it in May because we could get it on the ballot when the May primary is going on. We wouldn't have to pay for a special election, which would be a very smart way to do it. That pushes us real hard, but we're willing to be pushed hard if we can get on the ballot that fast. So that's the time frame for getting it done. And that means then we would know by September of 1992 at the latest whether we had in fact a structure that was ready to move to the future, or whether we could go ahead and finish the budgets at state and local level based on the current tax structure. I just have to tell you, one of the most interesting things about being governor, and I travel the state all the time, is if I go to Eastern Oregon, they say to me, it's always those people between Portland and Medford who get all the attention and money. And if I go down to Coos Bay, they say, you don't care about the folks on the coast, particularly Coos and Curry County. And if I come to Medford, they say, you don't care about the folks. I mean, I think it's just who we are. None of us get enough attention to feel very good about government. Maybe that's part of the problem. And I'm trying real hard. I mean, if you weren't getting any attention, I wouldn't be here, okay? I wouldn't have started out in Pendleton if I didn't care about Eastern Oregon. So this isn't going to work well if we do us and them. This is for the state as a whole to make sure we have a good tax structure and services no matter where you live in Oregon, small, large, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, agricultural city, doesn't matter. It's not going to work if it doesn't work for all of this state. I care about this state, all of this state, and we're going to make this work. Everybody's going to have a chance to participate, and nobody's going to get special treatment in the process. Let me say that to you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much for coming. Thank you.